ring with him. And that doesn't mean that, they could have him beat everybody. That means they could have him lose to people, and then they'd agree to lose back to him. The three of them created most of the modern wrestling finishes today, almost 100 years ago, and they still work. It's incredible.
Did he strangle people?
Well, he'd choke their neck a little bit, but I don't think he actually killed anybody. He's not the first strangler. There was an Evan the Strangler Lewis around the turn of the century.
I don't need you telling people about what my grandpappy got up to in his spare time.
Man, he was a big star in the pre 20th century.
They do the family name first in Scotland, do they?
Yeah.
That's how that works.
Yeah. That is 100%. As long as there are no further questions, that is the naming convention of Scottish families. Welcome to Contesting Wrestling. We are a podcast where we talk about the things that fans love and the things that everyone else really doesn't about the world's most popular form of simulated combat. My name is Evan Burke. I'm a writer. I am somebody who generally doesn't care for wrestling. I was born in the mid-'80s. I came of age at the time of Stone Cold Steve Austin, stuff like that. That's my knowledge of wrestling. I hated it. I thought it was the dumbest thing ever. I am very good friends with these two men. I am very good friends with my co-hosts here on this podcast. I've known both of them for 20 years, and they have a different perspective on wrestling, and they want to change my perspective. So, Ben?
I am Dr. Ben Abelson, professor of philosophy at Mercy College, and I likes me some wrestling.
And my name's Doc Diamondfire. I have been involved in pro wrestling now for about 10 years. Of course, I've been watching it for many, many years before that. I've trained at many schools. I've wrestled in a few places. I do commentary. I do ring announcing. I do a little bit of everything. And I'm here to bring the perspective of somebody who's been on the inside.
We're into this a bit now. I've watched several matches. It's been progressing. I've been starting to, maybe, I don't know how much I'm enjoying it, but I'm getting more of an idea. And so it seemed to me I should cut right to the chase. I asked Ben and Doc, what is the greatest match ever? Let's watch what you think is the greatest match ever. I thought this was going to take a little while, right? I thought you were going to have to go and consult and blah, blah, blah. But instead, you just looked right at each other and you said two words, which are?
Bret and Owen.
Bret and Owen is in my top two or three.
I guess those are three words.
Yeah, Bret/Owen, and where the slash is silent. I think that Bret Owen is in I'd say my top three or so. But I think for Doc, it is the absolute number one.
It's what I've told people for years whenever the question comes up. It's the perfect wrestling match. It has a great story going in. Both guys establish their characters in and out of the match. The match is wrestled to perfection. The finish is great. It tells exactly the story that it needs to, and both men were bigger stars at the end of it than they were coming in. What else do you know? It was at Wrestlemania in Madison Square Garden. The crowd was with it. Well, what more can you ask for?
Our perceptions may be slightly gilded by the fact that this match happened when we were both at the height of our wrestling fandom as children. That might bias us to some degree,
sure.
But looking back on it, it holds up in ways that other matches that I loved as a kid do not. I think it really, as objectively speaking as one can be, is definitely one of the greatest matches of all time.
And it is always satisfying when things you love as a child, when you go back as an adult and they're still great.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are so many times you go and watch a movie and you're just like, oh wow, the never-ending story is crap, is a nonsensical shit field. But
But picking up on what Doc was saying, I think what really makes this match so great is, for me, it's the best example of a larger story and context of the match being expressed perfectly well through the actual wrestling, through the actual wrestling moves. The wrestling tells and reinforces the story that was built around the match to perfection.
Now, is that what you were thinking? Were you thinking along those lines when you also picked the bad match for this week?
Yeah, I think to some degree, yes. So I think what's really bad about this bad match is that the performers and the characters do not live up to the story that they're telling.
Okay. And
I think that's fair. I think that's a good assessment of what's happening. They had a great idea of what they wanted to do, but they couldn't pull it off. It wasn't that night for them.
And for the listeners, what is our bad match?
This is Undertaker versus Roman Reigns from Wrestlemania 33.
At this point, I think they're just calling it WrestleMania every year and hoping you don't realize it's in its 30s.
The one in 2017. Yeah, because we're not supposed to remember that we're in our 30s. Yeah, when WrestleMania 40 comes around, it's gonna be rough.
It's gonna be
something, yeah.
Big moment where it enters one giant midlife crisis.
Oh, it's already there. But this is not a podcast about current wrestling product. If you'd like to hear a podcast about the current wrestling product, use Google. There's thousands of them.
Literally thousands. When we were trying to name this podcast, I got very discouraged about even making this.
Though I will say this bad match this week, it's recent enough that it's fairly indicative of what's wrong with the current product.
Sure.
And it's not an all-time stinker. It doesn't hold its place as the main event of WrestleMania that year.
I felt like even with my very limited knowledge of wrestling, I have seen one Undertaker match so far before we saw this one. And I feel like I really understood what was bad. Like, this was bad wrestling in a way that I haven't really seen yet, because so far the bad wrestling that I've seen has either been just poorly executed, shitty indie matches, or, I don't know, just sophomoric toxic masculinity and horrific misogyny and long stretches of dudes lying around a ring and not even doing anything interesting.
And just like total moronic idiocy, like the Clowns and Kings match.
Like the Clowns Kings match, the ass cream bit that sticks out in my memory.
Intelligence insulting garbage.
Yeah, exactly. I love dumb shit. I'm not anti-dumb shit.
Oh, yeah.
But
now, you can't be into wrestling and not at least like dumb shit.
You can't like keep from killing yourself these days if you don't have some penchant for dumb shit.
Yeah, yeah. Otherwise, how can you even exist in society, in American society in 2019? So right off the bat, in Bret Owen, which I'm excited about. I'm ready to watch this. So they're brothers. And you've explained to me they come from a wrestling family. Because I remember when we watched the Hart-Austin match, they had Bret Hart's dad in front looking very disappointed in him.
Did you watch the pre-match explanations or just the match?
I watched the pre-match explanation for Undertaker Reigns. I honestly don't remember if I watched Bret Owen.
You should generally watch
the
the video packages for these things.
Yeah. I think I did. I must have. It's not sticking.
Let me give a quick recap of the story so far, if you will. Bret Hart, of course, had been on his journey to the top of the WWF for many years. Finally gets there. Great. Owen Hart, his youngest brother. There are a dozen Hart kids.
There are 8 boys and 4 girls.
And how many are between the two? Bret is the oldest?
Is the oldest, and Owen is the youngest.
Wow.
Bret isn't the oldest. There were 1 or 2 that were older than him, including one that died very young as a child. It was Bret's older brother. Well, when you have a dozen kids, it sometimes happens. To not get quite into the darkness of all that.
Well, so all 8 brothers were wrestlers, and all 4 sisters married wrestlers.
You say let's not get into the darkness, but I can only imagine that a giant wrestling family where the father is a wrestling trainer, I'm imagining that is just darkness.
Yes.
The psychosexual dominance.
You want psychosexual
rife.
dominance? Stu Hart's training facility was in the basement of their house, and it was known as the dungeon because if you were sitting on the main floor of the house, you could hear the boys screaming as he twisted them into the most painful days of their lives. When Stu was an old man, people would go to his house, and the word is like, Stu's very nice. Don't get real close to him. He'll start putting his hands on your arms, and before you know it, he'll be like, well, when I put my thumb here, you're going to pass out. And then you're just going to pass out.
Jesus.
Yeah,
he ran Calgary for years in terms of he promoted Stampede Wrestling in the territory until Vince McMahon came along and bought out most of the indies and otherwise put them out of business.
Yeah, he was clearly some kind of sadist, and his kids and whoever else came over to the house went through serious torture. And so I think it engendered in their minds a sense of wrestling as actually really real, as having very real stakes that informed to a large degree the way they, especially Bret Hart, carried themselves in the business.
Knowing nothing about this, I feel very confident in saying that he pitted his children against each other, that he made them feel like his love for them was directly connected to how good they were at wrestling.
Yeah.
That's
fair, probably.
Yeah, this is all like if there was a fucking Lifetime movie about this, I'd be like, all right, this is a little over the top. Like even for like, you know what I mean? This is not.
Oh, what, the dungeon isn't realistic enough for you? He trained a lot of world-class wrestlers in that dungeon, through Chris Jericho is still active. He trained at the dungeon, Of course, the dungeon shut down years ago. Stu has been dead for a very long time, or else I wouldn't say a word against him. He may come for me.
I'm still worried about that. He sounds like somebody who lives in the nightmare dimension.
Yeah. Oh, we'll show you him someday. Because he shows up at a few events, just sitting there.
Evan saw him at the Hart Austin match.
Right.
And he did look, he looked disappointed in a way that I've never seen that look on another person's face quite so clearly. Like, I don't think, I'm lucky in that.
And you've had all the worst jobs with the worst bosses.
I've had the worst jobs with the worst bosses. I've never worked for anybody physically capable of being that disappointed.
Okay, so let me give you a recap of the story so far. Bret Hart had his rise in the WWF, took many years. He reached the top. He won the championship. He lost the championship. He is the big established top superstar. Bret's brother Owen, several years his junior, had been in and out of the WWF for the previous 5 years, building his resume around the world. He became one of the premier high flyers. And just in the past year or two in the WWF had they started taking him seriously. He had a couple of throwaway gimmicks here and there, including one where he was under a mask called the Blue Blazer. So people didn't know he was Bret's brother so that they wouldn't judge him against Bret. Anyway, very little was made of the fact that they were brothers other than the commentators mentioning it until the previous Survivor Series to this WrestleMania. It was that November.
Jerry Lawler.
Yeah, Jerry Lawler was supposed to be in that match with his 3 knights.
Well, he started bullying Owen in order to get to Bret.
Well, he started insulting Bret's parents.
Right, and then Owen came to the defense of their parents,
right,
and then he beat up Owen.
Lawler beat up Owen. Lawler was much higher on the pecking order than Owen at that point.
They would frequently sort of fridge Owen to get heat against Bret's enemies.
Mm-hmm.
Where
they would heap abuse onto Owen just for the character development of Bret versus whoever.
Exactly.
Anyway, it comes to the Survivor Series. Jerry Lawler had been insulting Bret's family. He was going to get 3 guys in masks, and Bret Hart was going to get 3 of his brothers. He got Owen Hart, and he got Bruce Hart, and he got Keith Hart, which are 2 of the other Hart brothers.
Keith is a firefighter.
Yes, and Bruce is a school teacher. They were both wrestlers. They had both been retired for a little while. Jerry Lawler was pulled from the match just before it and was replaced by Shawn Michaels. I had mentioned to you once before to maybe Google Jerry Lawler allegations, and you'll hear about all of that. Nothing came of it. Everybody dropped their stories, and they rehired Lawler a little bit later. But, I'll let you draw your own conclusions.
Is he still alive?
Oh, yeah. He died on Raw once. His heart stopped for 20 minutes. He was doing commentary. Then all of a sudden, he literally croaks. And then the commentary goes off, and you see the doctors rushing to his aid, and they pull him backstage. And the other guy, Michael Cole, to his credit, pulls himself together and updates everyone on whether or not the King is alive or dead. And now he's fine.
He had a match earlier that night.
Yeah, he had a match earlier that night. Yeah, he blames it on the guy who gave him 10 elbow drops to the chest. Well,
I guess that's a risk.
Well, in the world of pro wrestling, they now call that move the Heartstopper elbows. Anyway, Jerry Lawler was pulled from this match.
How would you feel? How would you feel in a match if somebody did that? Personally, if you were wrestling somebody and they did a move that was known as a move that maybe could kill you. I guess that's all.
Well,
that's
all the moves, really.
They're elbow drops. I mean, really, in reality,
I've taken 10 elbow drops in a row. That's just. It's more because of Jerry's age and relative condition. He still wrestled, a dozen matches a month at independent wrestling shows, but his match is mostly he stands there and talks, and then he delivers a pile driver. He wasn't in great shape or anything. A lot of punching. He famously said he never watched his diet, and he does now, so that he doesn't have another heart attack live on camera.
But the great Japanese wrestler Mitsuharu Misawa died from just a routine backdrop because he hadn't been to the doctor in decades. He hadn't been to a scientific doctor, not a holistic person. He didn't know that his spinal cord was just hanging from a thread. Jesus. And so this regular move killed him.
Died in the ring.
Oh, man. Go to the doctor, people. Go to the doctor.
So we're getting sidetracked again. At this Survivor Series, they replaced Jerry Lawler with Shawn Michaels. So it's Shawn Michaels and Jerry Lawler's Knights for some reason versus the Hart brothers. And the Hart brothers trounce Shawn Michaels and his Knights. Owen Hart is the only one on the team that gets eliminated because they're elimination matches. And Bret Hart was injured. He tagged out. He was walking across the apron of the ring. Owen Hart gets whipped off the ropes. Runs into Bret accidentally. Bret falls into the metal guardrail. The other brothers go to check on Bret, and Owen gets rolled up and pinned. And then he gets up, and his brothers are all there comforting Bret. And he's like, I just got pinned. Why? So he leaves. And then he comes back at the end of the match. And
to Owen's credit, what's one of the first things you learn about standing outside the ring when the match is going on?
Well,
don't stand in the middle of the ropes.
Don't stand in the middle of the ropes. You'll get hit. I mean, you also got to look, but that's another story. Hey, Bret was injured, his face and everything. That was the deal. Anyway, he comes out at the end of the match, and there's beef, and they leave it dangling. And then for the next couple of weeks, Owen comes out on television being like, I've been in the shadow of Bret Hart. I don't want to be in the shadow of Bret Hart anymore. And then they make up, and they're like, okay, over Christmas, and they're like, okay, we're not going to wrestle. Bret Hart is like, I'll fight anybody. I'm not going to wrestle my brother Owen. That's out of the question. So they team up as a tag team, and they face the tag team champions, the Quebecers, at the Royal Rumble. And Bret Hart...
We'll tell you the story about why they're the Quebecers some other time.
Yeah, that's a different story. They're not exactly the Mounties, but they're kind of the Mounties.
They couldn't be the Mounties. The Canadian government was upset.
Would not allow
the
them.
demonization of Mounties.
Yes. Well, they were excellent heels. One of them is still active. Anyway.
PCO.
He's not human. So they have the match with the Quebecers, and Bret Hart injures his knee during the match. And
that trick Bret Hart knee.
Yeah, he injures it in almost every match. And
was that a real thing? Or
no, it's just the way Bret sold.
Just a go-to.
If there's one hole in Bret's game, is that he fell on the I hurt my knee, and that's how you can get one up on me thing in too many matches. But no, Bret was very good. And eventually they had the referee stop the match because Bret was too injured to go on. So they don't win the tag titles.
I mean, it is somewhat realistic that if you have a nagging injury, that it will become a target in every
It's a
match.
minor nitpick. So the Quebecers take their belts and they leave. And Owen Hart gets in the ring and he's pissed at Bret. And he starts screaming at Bret, why didn't you make the tag? Or, you cost us the tag titles. And Bret's there trying to stand on one leg. And then Owen kicks Bret's injured leg out. One hit. He doesn't beat the crap out of Bret. Kicks his injured leg, and the crowd is booing and throwing things, and Owen is just screaming into the abyss, it's about me, what about me, wah, wah, literally like wahing. And then he was the most dynamite heel in the WWF.
So later that night, this was at the Royal Rumble, Bret Hart wins the Royal Rumble. He actually ties with Lex Luger.
Two guys fall out of the ring at the same time and hit the floor at the same time.
So what was Owen's character? Oh, sorry. Well, here you.
So if you win the Royal Rumble, you get the title match at WrestleMania. So Bret is entitled to a title match at WrestleMania now after the end of the Royal Rumble, despite having lost this tag team match earlier in the night, teaming with Owen. To answer the question you just asked, Owen becomes this resentful, sniveling, jealous younger brother. That's his character.
Works. I could see that. There's got to be something real to that, right? There has to be. There's a point during the match where Bret puts Owen in a hold where Owen is upside down, and Bret is basically pressing his penis and balls into Owen's penis and balls. And I'm looking at this, and I'm like, if this is a wrestling hold, I'm sure these guys have done it on each other a million times over the years. And if you grow up with your older brother constantly doing that, that's got to get to you. That's got to be, you have to be actually upset. We'll watch it later.
Yeah, I wonder what move you're talking about.
Just be the
is that the sharpshooter? Yeah.
Well, or maybe it was during a reverse. I don't know. Something. It was definitely. It looked. I mean,
the sharpshooter reversals are a big part of the match because the sharpshooter being Bret Hart's big signature finishing move.
The leg lock he keeps trying to put on.
And Owen has a slightly different version of that leg lock that he developed himself, and so them battling back and forth with the sharpshooter is sort of a microcosm of the whole story.
Sure. Well, that's all right. So here, finish the background, but then we can get
this has all been very disjointed.
So then they decide that for WrestleMania, since Luger and Bret are both entitled to championship matches, that they're both going to get title matches. But Luger's going to get the first one, so Bret also has to have a match Win or lose, he's going to go on and get his title match. But he has to have a match so it's fair, just in case whoever wins the first title match will have already had a match. So for it to be fair, Bret is also going to have a match, and it's going to be against Owen.
Yeah, they had set it up so if Lex had gotten the first title match, that Bret's opponent would be Owen, and Lex won his coin toss, so that's what happened.
So the Bret-Owen match is the first match on the card at WrestleMania 10, and then Bret Hart's title match would be the main event.
Yeah, the last match on the card.
This is like an older style of wrestling, kind of, right? Because it looks to me a lot more like a theatrical version of Olympic wrestling.
That's the style that Stu would teach his kids.
Sure.
You know, it's a lot more realistic than, you know, the traditional Northeast style of big guys putting each other in bear hugs, but it's still not like, it still doesn't look really crazy or dangerous like a lot of the spot stuff that comes later.
No, it looks impressive in the sense that, like, I'm watching them do these reversals on each other and stuff, and I can tell that it's something that is hard to do and that probably required a lot of training. Is probably hard to do. It's hard to improvise, certainly.
Owen has a little tinge of like more flashy Japanese and Mexican style wrestling, just a little bit. And he would become one of the bigger innovators or popularizers of that kind of stuff in America. But we're not quite there yet. And especially since he's a heel, he's not going to do too much that's flashy. Yeah. But he does enough of it to show that he's the better acrobat, right? He's the better athlete of the two. While Bret is a little bit bigger and stronger, Owen is a little bit more athletic. So they're sort of balanced in that way. And then so the question really comes down to the technical wrestling, right? Who is actually the better technical wrestler?
Well, and so that kind of gets into what I didn't like about this match, which I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much it's not necessarily unique to this match, but it was really cool at first, and like they're doing these reverses, a hold and then a reverse, and then a hold and then a reverse, and there's this, and I'm sure that there's story, stuff that I'm not aware of, obviously, that would make it more interesting. But after a while, like, it bumps into the sports problem for me, where it is still, now they've got the ball. Now they've got the ball. Now Team A has the ball. Now Team B has... in a fucking reversal development that nobody could have predicted, Team B has the ball again. Oh, well, hold up, though, because now fucking Team A has the ball. Everybody freak out. And then I'm sitting there, and everybody's watching sports at the bar and screaming in a loud voice that I've never heard them use before, even though it's people I've known and loved my whole life, and I'm sitting there confused and scared, and I don't get the appeal.
Well, reversals of fortune are essential and common to pretty much every form of storytelling.
Sure. Do you see where I am coming from?
Well, I think that if the problem is this is too much like sports, it's a valid criticism, but you're not going to get around it because they're trying to be like sports.
But I guess it's less that it's too much like sports, because obviously all the matches that we've seen, even the ones that I've enjoyed, involve that sort of the reversal of fortune and the chances and stuff. This to me seemed like it was perhaps it was because an older style, and I've seen more wrestling in the newer style or something like that.
I'm sure that's some of it.
This seemed, after a while, it was really just he did this hold, and then the other guy reversed it, and then the other guy did this hold, and the first guy. Well,
I think a lot of the storytelling in this match is in the subtleties between the holds. Like Bret Hart would be very intense, and he wanted to get the holds and win the match. But every time Owen did anything, there was something unfair that he was doing. Mm-hmm. He either got into the hold because he pulled Bret's hair, or he manipulated Bret's fingers, or he's just giving him the bad mouth while in the hold because he's being a whiner. Or he tries to leave at one point and Bret throws him back in the ring, or he slaps Bret in the face, which is technically legal, but, it's just kind of dirty. Mm-hmm. And that's what gets the crowd. Like I've said before, it's not so much you want the crowd to want one party or the other to win. Sure. If you can get the crowd to want one party or the other to win, then you're not focusing on how good the moves look. You're focusing on, man, I hope Team A gets the ball and keeps it.
Sure.
And I think Owen really does an amazing job in the match of staying the heel. of doing all these subtle things. So he's clearly the heel, despite being smaller, despite being more athletic,
despite being the little brother.
He's the guy who you would normally root for as the underdog.
Yeah.
But he, in this context, is more villainous.
And I think a lot of people still did, actually. If you talk to people who are, I think, a little bit older than us, who were like already almost adolescents when they saw this match, they loved Owen. Because they were already ready for Stone Cold,
Right.
But about the actual moves, missing a lot of the context is going to matter here. Not knowing that the sharpshooter is Bret Hart's finishing move and the meaning of the sharpshooter,
and that Owen had started using it once he turned on Bret and started claiming that he actually came up with it, not Bret, which was a lot. Neither of them came up with it. That's another story.
Not knowing that the Indian Deathlock that Owen pulls out is a very rarely seen move at that time, and that what Owen was showing by pulling that move out was that his technical knowledge and acumen was actually even deeper than Bret's.
Bret does not know everything that Owen knows, because Bret's been in the WWF for the last 10 years, great, but Owen's been traveling the world and wrestling in Japan and wrestling in Mexico and learning different styles, not just Stampede Canadian straightforward, I'm going to put you in a hold and then I'm going to hit you wrestling.
And when we get to the finish, the victory roll that Bret is attempting coming out of the corner is a move that fans had seen Bret Hart use to beat people who he at that point was unable to beat. He'd pull it out of thin air, basically.
Bam Bam Bigelow, a man much bigger than him the previous year with it, because it's a momentum move. You're on the guy's shoulders, you fall down to the mat, you put your shoulders on the mat, you grab your opponent's legs, you roll all the way over so their shoulders are on the mat, and you win.
But as opposed to Bret, who had spent this whole time saying he's not going to wrestle his brother, didn't even have it in his mind that he would wrestle his brother. As opposed to him, Owen has been strategizing for how to beat Bret his entire life.
Sure.
And so watched that match and knew, if he goes for that, I'm going to go for the counter. And that's what he did in order to win.
There's history attached to these moves. There's history attached to their styles and where their styles diverge. There's history beyond just a sort of standard sibling rivalry.
Yeah, there's motivation behind the characters, which, you need all of that for a match like this. In modern wrestling, it's a lot flashier, so it's a lot easier just to grab on and be like, these guys are doing all of this stuff. But that kind of stuff does not make deep connections with an audience. The characters make deep connections with the audience. It's like, you ever see a movie that's nothing but explosions, and it's going to make a lot of money somewhere, but you don't care about anybody in it.
There's a greater question here, which is, a question you can ask about pretty much any art form, which is how much, and I think this is something we've talked about to some degree before, how much foreknowledge you need when you come to something. If you play somebody a song that you love and they don't like it, your reaction naturally is, you want to start explaining why the song is actually good. And you're like, well, you got to understand, on this album especially, here I'm going to play you some more of the album. And then also, you got to think about their catalog,
right,
and all this. If you lend somebody a book and they don't know anything about it, how important is the context of that book for
I don't
you?
speak German.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've already brought up, I think Doc brought up in a previous episode on this point, that usually you need to have been watching the TV for the month leading up to the pay-per-view, at least, right? That's what they've expected that you've seen for this particular match. For any particular piece of art, and wrestling included, I think generally there are going to be levels at which you can appreciate it. And the more context you have, the more you can appreciate it. I know with Chikara Pro, it seems to be designed to me where I can watch an individual Chikara show and enjoy it as a wrestling show. If I know all the intricate storylines that have been going on all year, I'm going to enjoy it and appreciate it to a much greater level.
So it's sort of like sometimes you can take a chapter out of a book and it stands on its own and you can read it without the context of the rest of the book and it still works as a piece of writing. And then other times you can have something that is much more impactful in the context of if you read the whole book, but reading it out of place would be... Well, it's actually this more right before I came down here, Laura was watching Lost Girl, the show Lost Girl that she watches that I've never caught up on. It looks all right. I just never really got into it. And she was watching the series finale. And so the one episode of the show I've seen is the series finale, and I was like, oh, okay, this is all right. This seems okay.
Yeah.
Think about watching Game of Thrones, whether you've read the books versus not having read the books.
If I could bring it kind of back to Bret versus Owen, even in the context of just this match, it's the first match on the card. So directly after the match, they interview Owen. They're like, "You just beat Bret Hart. He's getting a title match later. Do you think he can compete?" And Owen's like, "I'm not taking anything away from Bret. He's a great competitor, but I don't see how he could possibly compete in a world title match after the beating I just gave him." And then Yokozuna and Lex Luger have their match, and Yokozuna retains in a controversial fashion. And then the last match of the night is Yokozuna versus Bret Hart, and Bret beats Yokozuna and wins the title. And all the good guys come out, and they put Bret on their shoulders and parade him around the ring. And then Owen comes halfway down the aisle, and Macho Man Randy Savage runs to the front of the ring and opens the ropes, like, "Come in. Come celebrate with your brother." And Owen kind of shakes his head, and you see him like mouths like, "What about me?" And it's like, man, Owen beat Bret on his best night. If he had beat Bret 3 hours later, he'd be the WWF champion.
And
so
he got to say that over and over again for the next year that they were feuding.
As the two of them had dynamite matches across the country that people went to see,
So
including their cage match at SummerSlam.
Another thing to keep in mind with the wrestling business is when you have a piece of work like this Bret Owen match, what is it designed to do? It's designed to create a rivalry that's going to be able to sell tickets across the country at all their live events.
The match made Owen a star on the level he had not even remotely been beforehand. He beat Bret. And Bret had done interviews about the match, like, "Oh, you and Owen finally had the match. How did you decide to do this?" And he said that they came to him with the idea of having them do it with one of his other brothers, one of the other ones that were in the Survivor Series match. And Bret said no. And he said, "I said no for all the right reasons. Owen was the guy. These other guys weren't."
One last point about moves that I wanted to make. So earlier in the match, Owen hits Bret Hart with what we know as the Tombstone pile driver. It's funny because Undertaker wasn't on that WrestleMania.
Right.
So they let Owen use the Tombstone. They didn't call it that. But the pile driver is...
The Undertaker was busy living in the Nether Realm for several months before being resurrected to face Yokozuna after his battle with himself, which one day we're going to watch.
You've referred to this a few times, and I am intrigued.
So any kind of pile drivers are one of these archetypical moves that have a very specific meaning. So, I have kind of a theory that there are these archetypical wrestling moves. The body slam is the archetypical power move. It shows that you are stronger than your opponent. The arm drag is the archetypical finesse move. It shows that you have the agility to outmaneuver your opponent. The sleeper hold is the archetypical technical scientific move that a technical wrestler can beat someone.
I'm not going to injure you. You're just going to wake up and I'm going to have won.
The drop kick is the archetypical high-flying move. The pile driver has the meaning of ruthlessness. When you pile driver someone, you are sending the message that you don't care if you cripple or kill them. You're willing to do that in order to win the match.
It really is sort of the ultimate form of dominance, where you pick somebody up, flip them around, and drive them into the ground, like with all of your own body force. Like, there's pretty much no way in an actual fight, were that to happen, nobody watching the fight would be like, well, I mean, maybe he's going to get up and there's still something to do. Like, no, it's fairly definitive.
Right. So Owen hits Bret with the Tombstone pile driver earlier in the match, and you can sort of expect that from Owen, that he's going to be that ruthless. He doesn't care if he maims or kills his brother. He wants to win. But then later in the match, Bret does a pile driver. Yeah. And that's really interesting because it's like, well, no, Bret cares so much about winning that when it comes down to it, he'll even sacrifice his brother, who he claimed that he'd never fight before. And that really feeds in, I think, to the other Bret Hart match we watched with Austin, right? When it came down to it, when Austin was growing in popularity, Bret was willing to descend to his level and get all hardcore. And that really says something that's always been there in the Bret Hart character. He might be a good guy to a point, but as soon as it's a matter of him winning or losing the match, he'll pull out all the stuff.
He's still the Hitman.
If you put enough money in that briefcase, he will shoot the president.
Yeah.
Not the money. If he's the winner.
If he's the winner.
That's all he cares about.
Right. That's been as you were talking about how training that way would really make you think wrestling is real. That's been a major complaint about Bret Hart, is that he cares too much about whether or not he's winning his matches or being the champion, and it's which
seems like a dumb way to be competitive.
Well, so Scott Hall and Kevin Nash in one of their shoot interviews complained that the champion always makes the most money. Or at
They're
least
headlining the shows.
Traditionally, that was the case. So if you're the champion, you make the most money. Now, Bret didn't care about making more money. He just wanted to win. So he wasn't asking for higher paydays, which really annoyed the people lower in the card. Because if he doesn't make more money, they can't make more money.
Yeah, it's your responsibility as the person with the purse strings to the billionaire corporation to get them to open them up for everyone.
So he was just lowering the bar for everybody.
Yeah,
and it just affected him the least.
Yeah.
Right, and I guess he didn't. A lot of guys get into wrestling as a business. They want to make money. That doesn't seem to
more
be
then than now.
Right, more than now. Definitely, there's a lot more fans in the business nowadays.
I mean, that doesn't seem like a great way to make money.
Well, it did decades ago. Like, picture this: you're a bodybuilder, maybe you're a B-tier football player, and you train at your local gym with all of the big muscle heads. And a guy comes up to you and says, "Hey, you look pretty good. Are you interested in getting into professional wrestling? We run shows in this state and the 2 states next to us. You have $1 million look. Come train with us for a month, and then we'll put you on the road and pay you every night. And if you get good, you can make a lot of money."
Even if you weren't.
As opposed to come to our training facility in Orlando where we're going to take over every facet of your life and make you tour the country, and maybe you won't make any money. It was a lot less of a risk. And if you didn't like it, you could just get out a lot easier then, too.
It was like being like a road comic or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Like where you could do it. It didn't take that much prep, and you didn't need to be that good because there were a lot of places that you were going that were just honestly happy to have a show.
There are actually a lot of parallels between stand-up comedy and professional wrestling.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
Especially if you had a good look or were just a really big guy.
Yeah.
Like, some people have lamented as the style has changed and the wrestlers have gotten smaller, this line of work that was available to really, really big guys who don't have all that many options has now dried up.
There's only so many bars that need a bouncer that,
Exactly.
Like big guys are seen now more as clumsy than anything else. If you're a really big guy that comes out and can prove that you're agile, you can still be a huge star.
Then you're gold,
Now, if we're going to talk about a very large man appearing to be incredibly clumsy to the point where he no longer seems to be in charge of his body anymore.
I see where this is going.
Man, this Undertaker-Roman Reigns match was a really, really sad, hard thing to watch. Even as somebody who's not that invested, I was like, oh, I just felt bad.
It is
right,
the
man.
saddest WrestleMania ending ever.
Roman just isn't that coordinated.
No, it's true. It's Roman. It was all Roman's fault.
Okay, so we watched Roman Reigns versus The Undertaker 2017. This was presented to me as a bad match. And first off, The Undertaker comes out, and my first thought is like, here is a guy who has spent most of his life in really good shape, working out constantly. His pectoral muscles have passed into the large gray area between pectoral muscles and old man titties. And it made me really afraid for my body, right? Because I'm like, if he looks like this when he gets old, I'm going to die. Or I'll melt into a puddle. Like, my body now looks a little bit like The Undertaker does in 2017.
I mean, he's also 6'10" and 300 pounds, and like keeping that up throughout your life is going to be a little bit harder.
It's got to be hard on your knees.
Oh, yeah.
Boy.
And also taking all those bumps and all those punishment to his body probably hasn't helped.
And one thing, I'm not trying to like body shame the Undertaker here, but this is definitely an example where like when you're so used to seeing people who are like ripped and like should be out there in really good shape, and then he comes out, and my immediate thought was like, oh no, I'm just worried. I'm worried about him. I'm worried. I've seen him do stuff where he like jumps out of the ring, and I'm like, if he does that now, like he's going to die.
And he did.
Yeah.
And it was not pretty.
It did not. I was really worried about that.
My dad still says to me sometimes, hey, does The Undertaker still wrestle? And he's very surprised when I tell him yes, occasionally.
Yeah, compared to that match with Edge that we watched before, where he still, and that was only, 5 years earlier? Something like that.
Yeah.
He soared out of the ring
Yeah.
in that match. This one, he like barely makes it over.
And so, Roman Reigns comes out. They throw around the word character a lot for guys who do not seem to have much of a personality at all, which I feel like is kind of the core thing that you need as a character.
That is the problem with Roman Reigns. The main problem that it's always been the case with Roman Reigns. They pushed him to the moon as a main event guy without ever really fleshing out who he was.
Yeah, he has this whole like the Roman Empire, I guess. So if he gets the championship, he promises to return the WWE to a state of autarky. Versus if the Undertaker wins, he will continue his reign as sort of a nihilist theocrat.
That would at least be interesting.
That's not what they were
going
for.
It's just his name is Roman, so they branded his stuff Roman Empire. I mean, I guess he's half Italian, but, he's much more famous for being half Samoan, and he's in with the Samoan dynasty.
Yeah, if anything, the Empire thing refers to the Samoan dynasty.
Yeah, the Samoan dynasty,
and the fact that
really.
he's not the first, there was The Rock and whatever, but he's sort of, I don't know, he's the next great Samoan in a way.
There's one large extended family of Samoan guys that have had a lot of success in wrestling over the last 40 years.
All Samoan wrestlers are related except for Samoa Joe.
Samoa Joe is not related to the Anoa'i family.
Is he Samoan?
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's good. That would be.
I mean, he's from California, but he's Samoan.
Sure.
I mean, I haven't encountered any other Samoans that are not Anoa'is.
Oh, there was that one guy. What was his name? He was on the Indies for a while. This is riveting.
Yeah,
Anyway,
this is good. This is premium content here. He comes. So Roman Reigns comes out, and he's got. He wears what I can only describe as like Monster Energy brand Spider-Man gear.
That's accurate.
Spot on.
And we're all frustrated by the fact that he's wearing body armor. Like, he's a baby face. He's already a big guy. And then we're supposed to have sympathy for him when he's getting beaten up, when he's wearing freaking, a flak jacket.
And he looks like he's in good shape. I don't know. He's a good-looking guy. I'm watching him. I'm like, oh, he's one of the more attractive wrestlers I've seen.
Yeah.
He
Ladies
should be
love
in
him.
modeling or something like that, because he does not have any fucking personality. This whole match. Also, I got a real. If you got an incompetent home health aide for your ailing grandfather, kind of that was what this match felt like.
Oh,
where
man.
he's there doing all of the things, like trying to help the Undertaker look like he's having a great match and do all the stuff. He's not good at it.
Right. No, that's exactly it. He's not good enough to carry the aging Undertaker to where the Undertaker can still look good and Roman can still look good.
And especially to the point where, it's supposed to be a kind of changing of the guard, like passing the torch match, where it's going to be Reigns' yard now. He's going to sort of take over for the Undertaker. And it's incredibly depressing that this is what we have to look forward to in the absence of the Taker.
The Undertaker is wrestling the whole match like your dad getting off the couch. Like that's what the whole energy is. And then Reigns at the beginning, at least, he seems like he kind of is. He can at least sell somewhat well. I don't know.
He doesn't
I guess
suck. That's not the issue,
But he does have a very limited moveset, though, which becomes a problem.
Okay. And let's talk about the jump punch.
Yes, the Superman punch.
How is that supposed to look effective? Because that just looks like somebody wasting a lot of energy.
He jumped. That makes it stronger, no?
It's not.
That's like
Is that how physics works?
Ever play Street Fighter 2 and then you jump punch?
Yeah, it does the same as a normal punch.
Yeah.
It's there to mess with people, or because you're just slamming on buttons. You shouldn't do that in real life.
No, you shouldn't do that in real life.
Don't be a button smasher with your own body in a ring where in front of 75,000 people or however many people.
See, if he was Superman, he would make that motion.
It looks good in silhouette on T-shirts.
Like Superman would just fly into you, though. That's the thing. He needs to jump and kind of get an arc, and then also, so he's like punch and then like twisting in the air, and it just fucking looks.
Yeah, it sucks.
Bad.
And then his other stronger finisher is the spear, which isn't all that much different.
And also was the signature move of another guy who fucking sucks.
Goldberg, yeah.
So I'm like, this guy is like the new Goldberg, which seems like who would have asked for that? Who wanted that? Let's have another fucking beefy nothing of a fucking guy.
Exactly. And the worst part of the match for me is when they come to really the one big spot that they needed to hit. So there are two big spots in the match. The first one is the spear through the table, and that one's fine, and it looks dramatic, and it's cool. But the one really big one that they had to hit was Reigns reversing the tombstone, which he completely fails to do. Even though he tries to pick him up a second time, and he drops him again. He just couldn't do it. And then what does he do? When he has to do another move, another freaking Superman punch.
Yeah.
I would have been so upset because there was one point where they get into a slap fight. I would have been so upset if I had come to this event and then just sat there for 6 hours waiting for the main event, and then it's just, we're going to alternate between slaps and casual strolling.
Right. There was no real intensity in their movements. I didn't get the impression that either of them were trying to win. There
was no intensity, and yet the Undertaker was visibly out of breath a lot.
Yeah.
There's a moment in the match where when they go over or when they go through the Spanish announcer table,
yes,
I feel like I can see the Undertaker admit to himself that his career is over.
And yet, he's still wrestling. They do that whole dramatic. So first of all, his WrestleMania streak had already ended at this point.
Sure.
Right. So it would have at least been something if Reigns had been ending the streak here, but he wasn't. Undertaker had already lost to Brock Lesnar a few years earlier. He was holding on and kept coming out. So, but this one, it looked like, all right, maybe this is the final retirement. A really sad match to have as his last match. But he leaves the hat and the gloves in the ring, and it's really sad and it's really dramatic, and he walks out and everyone's crying. But at least you think, all right, well, that was at least a beautiful visual moment to end The Undertaker's career. But within a year, he was back in the ring, and he's still out there doing it. I think he actually looks a little bit better now than he did then, but
does he have more magic powers now, or anything that? Because I could see him. He still has the gravitas and shit. So if they want to do something where he just goes up there and then fucking telekinetics people around or shoots lasers or death lasers. Sorry, obviously they would be death lasers.
I mean, he had the death lasers and stuff in the late 90s when that sort of thing was more in fashion. But
shooting people with lasers is so fucking 90s, bro.
Mostly what they've had him do since the Reigns match is just come out and dominate. So at the following WrestleMania, he came out and beat John Cena in 3 minutes. He just came out and squashed him. And then he did a tag match more recently where he teamed with Reigns, which was sad for different reasons. It was sad for the reason that Undertaker just looked so much better than Reigns in that match. But he had one long, serious match at one of their Saudi Arabia shows, and we can talk a lot about the WWE Saudi Arabia relationship.
Yeah.
But
that
he
should
had
be an episode that I need to do research for.
Yeah. He had a match with your favorite wrestler and mine, Goldberg, and it was
this was a couple of months ago.
It was pretty much exactly what you would imagine a match between them would be, and the worst possibility of that.
Yeah, after they both flew for 20 hours and they're hot and old, and Goldberg concusses himself really early on in it, and they just keep going, and it's very bad.
Drops the Undertaker on his head, and
how ironic that the Undertaker himself looks like he's going to die in recent matches.
I mean, that actually, I think, helps his character, right? The closer he actually is to death, the more realistic the Undertaker persona is.
I don't know if that tracks, actually. I don't know if I feel like
at least visually.
If he's trying to project a supernatural sort of terror, I don't know if looking older, and I mean, I'm also sure that if you see him in person, he's still a 7-foot tall guy who's 300 pounds, and that's,
I was disappointed when he started dyeing his hair, actually. I wanted to see him get grayer and grayer.
Roman just couldn't do the job with The Undertaker. A better wrestler who could better work around The Undertaker's limitations, because Taker's smart. He wouldn't be egotistical about it. A better wrestler could have had a better match with somebody so limited. And this has been a common problem with wrestling fans have tried to get the WWE to be like, look, it's not that we think Roman sucks. He's just not really the guy.
Well, and also,
but they keep going with him. They did a thing with John Cena. John Cena has been in and out the last several years. He's been making movies. He's like 40. He was on top for 15 years. For better or for worse, he's like the first guy in wrestling history who had been on top that hard for that long that is just graciously stepping aside to let the next generation take over. But they had him come back and face Reigns, and he did a promo on Monday Night Raw once where he's like, look, the main reason I'm here is that you're not doing it. And the crowd reacted properly because he's right.
Despite Cena being the first guy to graciously step aside, just no one has been able to fill his spot.
How does somebody like Roman Reigns get that far?
Vince saw him and liked him.
Vince liked his look. He saw freaking housewives getting wet, and that was it.
Okay, where did he see that happening? First off, but that's where was Roman Reigns exposed to housewives?
So on TV, on cable TV. I mean, so here's why I think that specifically. I remember someone posted on social media somewhere, just like this middle-aged woman with a homemade Roman Reigns t-shirt on the bus. And that just says everything.
So I get Vince seeing him and being like, all right, now you're going to wrestle. Now I'm going to have you doing this. But I don't get, like, all right, if a Hollywood producer sees, somebody on the street or something like that, and it's like, I'm going to put you in the pictures. I don't think that happens anymore. I don't think that's happened for a very long time. But it's like, also, like, even if they do, like, they get that person some acting classes. They put him in some shit.
Well, Reigns is fully trained.
But that's
but he went through the WWE developmental system.
You generally don't get to be in a movie with a huge budget unless you can do all of the things that a movie actor needs to do, which is a long list of weird shit that takes a lot of experience. Not just the acting, not just being somebody who you can work with, but like stuff like how to move, like how to hit your targets, how to move all this stuff. That's not necessarily complicated. When I'm watching this match, Reigns doesn't seem like he can do like a lot of basic shit that much lesser wrestlers can do. And so the question, does he really just gets to the top because Vince is like...
I mean, going with your analogy, how many A-list actors and actresses are there that you think just suck, but they're beautiful?
Yeah, I guess.
Or like pop stars.
They suck at acting, but I guess like they can still... like show up.
Yeah, Roman shows up on time. He's nice. He does PSAs with his daughter. He's he's related to, The Rock and all these other people that are in wrestling, and like that's it. And Vince is very single-minded. Once he thinks something is happening, it's very hard to change his mind. And one of the biggest problems is he is still just in charge of everything.
But also they're thinking about who's going to be really good as a guest, doing a guest spot on Good Morning America.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. For years, John Cena, every couple of months, just show up on Good Morning America, and they love him, and he's such a nice young man, Something that Vince himself has identified as a problem that's different than all of this is that he wants somebody to come up and take it. One of his problems with the younger generations is that we're not much people who just come up and take it. We're not like... Hulk Hogan, who, when the Vern Gagne decided, well, we're not really going to go with you, said, all right, brother, I'm leaving, and just left to a place where they would put him on top. It wasn't like, Bret Hart, who would be the best and constantly nag him about being, well, how come I'm not getting the spot? How come I'm not getting the spot? It wouldn't be like Steve Austin, who just took the audience and was like, you're coming with me. People are like, well, I'm doing my job. Are you going to go with me? I shouldn't even have to ask. Yeah, you got to ask. You got to not even ask. You got to take it.
But you got to
respects that.
But you got to be able to take it, right? So there's a weird gray area there because you also have to be an actor. You have to do your job and do what the script has told you to do and not complain too much about it not being what you want.
And also, you got to go and take it, but like you also do, you do still have to deliver to some degree.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like that. Like I think we've all known people in entertainment, in academia, and wherever who like they have all of the confidence of a Hulk Hogan. They have all the confidence of somebody who's like, oh, well, you should put me in. You should put me in. I'm the best. I'm the best. I'm the best. And then their actual work is nothing.
Right.
Roman has had some good matches against people who are better ring generals than he. And I mean, the Undertaker is a better ring general than he, but the Undertaker is a specific situation where, his mobility is limited and you really have to be good enough to work around it.
Yeah.
And Roman, I think, is good. I think he's a good professional wrestler, but he's not good enough to be in that spot.
All right. Well, I don't think I have a lot more to say about these two. I get with Bret Owen, I feel like I have a better understanding of why I did not connect with it as much.
That's good.
I feel like I guess I should try to do a little bit more research before. But now I'm getting sucked in. That's the thing. Now I got to learn all this crap before the matches. I can't just pop in and watch it and expect to get the full impact.
Yeah.
So I guess in that sense, you guys have won this episode. I have been keeping track of who wins and loses each episode.
I'm not sure if I said it before, but it's sort of unfortunate this day and age in wrestling where there isn't really a great weekly wrestling television show that can get you hooked like there used to be. Because I used to say you watch 3 weeks in a row and then you're going to be hooked. You're going to want to see what happens next.
Raw or SmackDown or both.
It was Raw at the time, I guess, basically. Though I've always liked SmackDown a little bit more.
What is, I guess we'll have to get into this for another episode, but what is like the general tonal difference between?
SmackDown has always been more the wrestling show. You're going to get longer matches, a lot more focus on wrestling, whereas Raw is more the entertainment show.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I was like, wow, this does not bode well for Raw, this sentence.
Well, no, yeah, Raw fucking sucks.
Shows.
If
one
they
that's
were
more
gonna-
of a wrestling show, and then the other one, a lot less wrestling in that wrestling show.
If they're going to have like wacky celebrity guests, they'll be on Raw.
Oh, okay.
Stuff
All right.
like that.
Raw is also 3 hours
Jesus.
Every week.
Fuck.
Every week.
There is no other medium of entertainment that is so goddamn demanding of its fans. This is something that blows my mind about wrestling. It's not just the length of time and like the commitment, but like once again, like having to know all of this history, all of this stuff. Like this is more demanding than classical music. As somebody who went to college to study fucking classical music, this is more complicated.
They
than that.
want the entirety of our minds and time and attention. That's what they want to colonize, like all of everything.
It works.
It's clearly
it's a
does.
whole alternative media.
And I guess
They think of it as a lifestyle.
because wrestling seems to simultaneously be one of the biggest industries in America, one of the biggest entertainment draws, at least in America, and probably in the rest of the world, and yet also does not seem to be that popular. It seems to be a small thing, and is that really just because every wrestling fan to wrestling fandom is worth 10 Game of Thrones fans to Game of Thrones fandom?
They've learned how to get more and more money out of each fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it used to be, well, let's pull in all the non-fans to watch our show so we get big ratings. Now it's, okay, we're down to 2 million people, but how much can we get from those 2 million people? Same thing as any kind of geek fandom. Same thing as a guy who only gets 300,000 views on their YouTube videos, but somehow that's their full-time job. Same kind of deal.
You know, Doc,
Yeah.
it's funny that you bring that up.
Yes.
Because if you are one of those fans who loves wrestling content and is and has a little extra cash to spare, you should go to patreon.com/contestingwrestling, and we've got a $1 thank you option that doesn't get you anything but our respect and our love and our appreciation.
Doc will like you.
And we've got
I still won't.
Yeah. That's for Ben and me to like you. You have to go with the $5 a month, but then you get access to premium content, which includes bonus episodes, watch-alongs, and other stuff that we'll think of. There's going to be this talk of a history blog. There's all kinds of stuff that we're going to come up with.
Anything we can come up with, we'll put up there as bonus content if you want to pay us for it.
My name is Evan Burke. You can find me on Twitter at Evan Burke, etc. That's Evan Burke, ETC. I also have a Facebook page that you can go to and an Instagram page that I haven't checked in like a year, but it's there. And you can find my writing at Evan Burke. That's Evan, BURKE, .biz.
I, Dr. Ben Abelson, can be found at ScribeBen on Twitter and Instagram, and I have an academia.edu page with some writings. That's about it.
And you can find me, Doc Diamondfire, on Twitter, at Dr. Diamondfire. That's at Dr. Diamondfire. At me, message me. I'm available for wrestling, ring announcing, commentary, whatever you need. So thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Check the notes of this episode for next episode's matches. Alrighty, see you next time.
Peace.
Yep.